Hi, my name is Jerry Giosa. I'm a parking consultant. And because the Webster block is primarily composed of parking, this project, parking takes on a high value of importance in solving the puzzle and coming up with good solutions for parking and redevelopment on the Webster block. So to look at, and it's difficult to do without the graphics, and when you see the graphics you'll see why. RBA has done a terrific job in putting together some slides that you'll appreciate. But as you know, the Webster block is filled with parking, and what happens is when you have a redevelopment situation and you're developing various portions of the parking areas, you're displacing parking, and at the same time with this new redevelopment you're creating additional parking demand. So as a result you have to kind of model out the supply and demand as it ebbs and flows throughout the development process. And that's one of the things we're very interested to hear your thoughts about. But the way we're thinking about it now is that we'd like to really get out ahead of the parking issue, and so we've got a 900-car parking garage in the first phase of this redevelopment project, and the reason for that is that once that garage is in place, it is going to start the process of redevelopment. It's going to jumpstart everything.
You have your visuals.
My name is Todd Bryant. Many of you know me already from, I'm the president of the Norwalk Preservation Trust, but in this case, I've just been brought into this project team as a historian, which is what I do for a living. I'm a principal at Heritage Resources, and we do historic preservation consulting in historic rehabilitation tax credits, National Register nominations, historic resource inventories, urban planning consulting, and a whole lot of other stuff that has a direct bearing on this kind of a project. And what I specifically am charged with doing is researching the history of what we now call the Webster block. And it's got a considerable 19th century history. You might see the 1922 map over there. It shows that it was in 1922. It was a pretty densely built out, vibrant residential and commercial district. Now, many of you may have lived in Norwalk when it was transformed into what it is today, and that's one of the stories that I want to tell. Because I don't think it's ever been really documented, is the urban renewal era transformation of that area from what you see in that 1922 map to what you see today. I think it's very important to understand how that process worked, because we're kind of in an equally transformative process right now with this plan. I also hope to be able to find some design cues that might be applied to this. Some land use cues, some residential or commercial use cues that existed previously, maybe in the 19th century, maybe in the 20th century, that might be applied to the way these buildings are either designed or used. So it's not only a matter of just figuring out what the story was, but ways to use what we learned from that story in this project. The kinds of things that I'm going to use to find that history are historic maps, some of which are up there, Sanborn maps, bird's eye maps, various other kinds of maps that are available, public documents, the proceedings of the council, newspaper articles.
Old people.
That too. That's what I was getting to. It wasn't that long ago. So many of the people who were involved in that process, the urban renewal process, are still alive. And with any luck, they'll actually tell me what happened. And I think the whole thing is going to be fascinating. So that's where we're going with this part. And I think it's kind of visionary of the redevelopment agency to want to include a historic portion of component of this project, because very often these things are approached kind of as whole cloth and as though it were, the Gobi Desert that you're building on, when in fact it's not. This place has a history and it deserves to be respected and included. That was the best I could do.
Hi, my name is Tim Sheehan. I'm the Executive Director of the Redevelopment Agency. As many of the faces here this evening will recall, the Redevelopment Agency put forward a plan for the redevelopment of the Webster Street block in 2004. In starting that process, it was very clear to the agency and the municipal bodies that would be reviewing that plan that there are a host of constituencies relative to the Webster Street lot that really need to be examined, and that an understanding of the needs of the lot and what the lot serves for the businesses that surround it need to be taken into careful consideration as we advance into a redevelopment of the lot area. The market has certainly changed since the time that we initially looked at the redevelopment of this site. I would say aspects of that plan are probably a little more aggressive than what the market can currently support. But given that we are 10 years out plus from the initial review of this area, the agency thought it was time to take a look at what the positive bones of the old plan are and keep those in, and we think that there's many, and then begin to look at areas that we need to consider readjusting the plan. And the RVA group went through a very competitive process to win this contract with the redevelopment agency. We're very happy that they're a local firm, especially tonight that they're only a minute away and that they can get their own projector. But I think the important thing is that they too are a user of the lot and understand a lot of the aspects relative to what happens in the lot as their office abuts the lot. Over the years since the plan was developed, there was a lot of comment as to when the city was advancing it forward and putting it out for development interest. What we came into was an era that came out pre-recession. We began to advance into more difficult economic times, and there was a host of development interest relative to this site. Pre-recession, fortunately, as we've emerged out of recession, there continues to be private sector interest in this development, and for that purpose, we think that it's an appropriate time to bring it out. To be fair, though, we actually had a pretty extensive discussion with the chairman of the various commissions, as well as the mayor, as to all of the issues that are entailed in a project of this magnitude, and it is still confirmed that it was an appropriate step forward for the city to begin to look at this. And I think that there might be some expectation that we're a lot further along in the process than we actually are. You're at the start of the process, and what you say here tonight will be incorporated into that process and will be taken into consideration as the plan further develops. So if you have issues of concern, if you have areas that you think that the plan should be more focused on, it's your opportunity after the presentation is done to begin to adjust what the consultants and what the agency might be thinking of relative to the redevelopment. And with that, I'll turn it over to RVA.
Two things. One is thank you. And in addition to what Tim just said about sort of glad you're here at the beginning of the process, that's perfect segue, because we are bringing to you some intelligence we've gathered from the field, and now we're sort of working together on what's next. But while we tee this up, I'd like Jerry to talk a little bit about how parking lays into thinking so far, and that will give us enough time to get the projector going. Jerry Giosa, Level G.
So Mark, what you don't know is I was up here for about 5 minutes, and then we went into a little historic discussion with this gentleman.
Yes.
And so they have heard a little bit about parking so far, but I will continue with that discussion.
Perfect.
And it's a very good point about where we are in the process. You know, this is, there's a lot of give and take here. We're very open to hearing suggestions and ideas from people who are close to what's going on that site. So, so that is important. We talked about the abundance of parking on the site right now. There's approximately 700 spaces. I spoke about our perceived need to get ahead of any parking problems that could ensue as a result of all this redevelopment that might occur on the site. So again, the general concept was to get out ahead of the parking problem, 900-car parking structure in the first phase, to ease the pressure, and then to make the redevelopment of the remainder of the parcel run smoother. And so right from the start, we're talking about surplus parking capacity on the site. As the various construction fences go up, and you're going to see this in the beautiful graphics that you're about to see, as the various construction fences go up to build the various portions and the apartment buildings and other ideas about redevelopment on the site, then that surplus parking capacity is going to be taken up by those uses. Having said that, there's a second phase for the parking garage expansion. So, so because everything, these projects never happen all at once. I'm involved in a project right now in Morristown, New Jersey, a very successful redevelopment that was actually built in 4 phases. And the 4th phase of that project has just gotten its final approval. But again, the parking garage was the first component, and then the various other redevelopment components came online after that. I've joked around with some planners who talk about TOD, transit-oriented development, and I've been in parking for over 30 years, and I tell them my stories about GOD, parking, garage-oriented development. That's right. So parking garages can be a catalyst for development to happen in their immediate vicinity. And I can't tell you how many times I have seen the earth being excavated, the cranes going up, and then all of a sudden, people want to develop what's going on. What's going on over there? 800 new parking spaces? Now they start to get serious about redeveloping the parcels in that vicinity. All right.
Yes.
So knowing that, that's part of the thinking in developing these parking plans.
And so, you know, that's where we are. You know, I think that when you guys think about it, you'll kind of ratify the aspiration of providing structured parking, and you'll acknowledge that these are the kinds of things that, you know, one should be thinking about, interblock activity. Yes, sir.
Mark, can you talk a little bit about pedestrian circulation through and around this block? Because what I'm seeing is parking-centric pedestrian movements. Everything goes to the parking garage. If I want to walk through Webster lot, I have to go through structure to go to the stop. Am I not reading this correctly? Or how does the pedestrian circulation play in these models?
The words in your head are the same words that are in my head. Exactly right. So I did do a little kind of a series of snapshots about how the interblock space might work, and it's a little ways back. But all I wanted to do was to acknowledge that, you know, that's an issue. You don't want it to be kind of an alien environment. and we want to design to that and build that into the expectations. So I'll talk about that offline. I'll show you those images, and you can provide, you know, that advice. But I'm totally got it. So one place to sort of follow up is with me or Jerry or Akko directly. Also follow, you know, the site. Voila, lights on. Yes, sir.
So when this was done in '04, it was in the context of the other big developments going on at Wall Street, on Waypoint, and 95.7. And I'm kind of curious, how has the change in the 95.7 use from what was predominantly an office area to now a commercial mall area, how does that change your projection of what kinds of commercial business activities to be successful in Webster now compared to what might have been the case 15 years ago?
Yeah, so in order for me to answer that question, I have to put Todd Poole's hat on, who's not here. So first I have to admit, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Second is, he would say something like, you know, right now retail's flat. So in 2004, retail was flat. So the answer is it doesn't really change anything. I mean, the underlying thesis at the time was that we were over retail. That hasn't changed. He would also say, you know, the new mall development is just pulling, you know, opportunity from somewhere else. So for the Webster block, you know, that's just not what we're trying to do here. You know, it's convenience, it's local, it's downtown. How they do?
Not great.
Yeah. Tell me what you know.
Well, a lot of assumptions in your answers, I'm not sure.
Yeah. What do you mean to think about? That's what I want to hear.
Well, look, I mean, if you have this sort of mega retail entity located a few hundred yards down the road, obviously it changes the nature of what people are going to come to Webster Street for compared to what they might have come for 15 years ago.
Right.
And I'm sort of trying to figure out, just not in a negative or positive, but just trying to see how has the thinking about what kind of destination Webster becomes with a mall or without a mall, how that has changed. I mean, we always thought in part that with the intense office development at 95.7 under that former plan, that affected the kind of and utilization of the housing that would be built at Webster Street, that maybe now with the mall, it changes a lot. I just want to get some idea of how your understanding of this area changes with the substitution of the mall for what was a huge Class A office development. So,
Follow up with the team on that. Be more credible in the future. Anything else? Yeah.
So you're pretty much saying you're staying away from office altogether down there, correct?
Any additional office? I mean, you know, we love the
You
fact
have
that-
50 Washington.
Yeah, we love the fact 50 Washington is there. Right.
Because it looked like from the drawing that the parking garage would be great in doubling the spaces, but you're also doubling the buildings, which means there's going to be twice as much traffic in that area. And I think with the building of the mall, the apartments that have come in downtown, that there still is demand for office in a downtown area like that, which is what you've seen with, you know, GE and Fairfield moving to Boston, where they want to be in the center of things. And we have the Merit 7 buildings, but there's really nothing around that. Everything kind of stays self-contained in those buildings. But I think there's demand for at least some of that structure to be zoned out for it, to allow businesses, maybe smaller businesses, to come in and have their employees have access to
Yeah.
downtown.
Well, two things about that. First, the economic development portion of the team isn't here. He would speak to that more credibly. Second, you know, I think that
the operator of 50 Washington would agree with you, this is where people want to be. He would love to be 100% occupied, and, he sees this as a place where businesses would gravitate towards.
I don't think we're saying that we're precluding office as a use. I think we're saying there's commercial uses that are scattered throughout the entire project. I think what we're basically drifting towards is that we're not talking about a large-scale office tower.
Right, okay.
That makes sense, right? Yeah. I agree with what you're saying, especially the Fairfield GE thing. I mean, all of us are thinking about that.
I've talked to people that, work in office buildings and around the area. There'll be a lot on Route 7, even further towards Wilton. And there's just not the excitement there because there's nothing close by where people want to come to work, not work from home all the time, go down the street. It would be perfect, which is obviously what 50 Washington would provide.
Yeah.
But not to say that there couldn't be newer buildings also added to this development to allow more of that.
Got it. Yes, sir.
I guess I'd just like to second some of that, but I feel like there should be some accolade made towards some office space.
Yeah.
And one thing I've noticed in some of the surrounding communities is that the zoning regs, like in New Canaan and Darien in particular, try to keep most of the office space off of the street level for the active uses. So it might be something for the city to consider, either in this zone or citywide, just to.
We've heard from brokers, there is virtually nothing that's
Right.
in and around the train station for a small amount of office space, that small
Right.
user. Again, I think we're fully supportive of looking at office use. It's just got to be at the appropriate scale.
Right, and my one other comment is that just with the residential development, I'm wondering if it's dense enough in that site, and that is probably the largest parcel, I'd say, parking lot in the downtown area with the largest potential for redevelopment and to bring residents where they need to be
Right.
so that they can access it. And it's kind of the other end of the bookshelf
Yeah.
from the ironworks. So it's like, you've already got a 12, 13-story building there at 50 Washington. It's like, height really shouldn't be that much of an issue. And in conjunction with that, I'd like to know.
Height's always an issue in Norwalk.
Yeah, but I'd like to know.
Cut 50 Well, actually, the zoning envelope is 12 stories on that site, isn't it?
But I'd like to know that, this kind of ties into parking, if the city has plans to improve the transit service and really try to reduce some of that parking demand by allowing people that want to come down and enjoy the Webster Block area to come down from the Avalon and from Waypoint.
As many know, that the agency's been trying to advance the circulator system for many years in terms of federal funding.
Right.
We've gotten some level of support to take a look at it relative to state investment into that. I think the word that we've gotten back is that we need to be taking this more incrementally
Right.
as opposed to, here's the Cadillac system. And,
Right.
we need to show that there's use, demand for it, and that it's an efficient way to provide public transportation.
Right, I'm not just talking about a circulator, though, I'm talking about just, there's probably several duplicitous bus routes that run down that corridor.
And that's what we would agree with, and
The
virtually
frequency and
empty.
the usability is absolutely terrible.
Right, right. But
But
we completely agree with the thought process that you shouldn't have to think about getting in your car if you're living at Avalon, up at the Wall Street area, to
Right.
come to have dinner in South Norwalk.
Right.
There needs to be a better way for the city to deal with that.
Right now.
I would agree with Colin in terms, and the other gentleman there, about there is probably demand for some office, particularly cool office. We have some down there, so we're somewhat aware of the demand. The communities that have offices in Resi do better, and we're not Boston. Whoever said we're Boston, we ain't Boston.
No, sure. I guess
We weren't on the GE list, moving to Sona.
I get it, but there are smaller businesses on that.
There are. They're
That
creative.
thought process.
Yeah, don't rush that. And I would also agree with Colin that density is important. I didn't see the development densities you had. Did you post the development densities or
I felt
no?
like it was about 300 units that would in our place.
Yeah, right now, just calibrating by the parking metric and the model, it's something on the order of 300 units.
So I think really important for South Norwalk, since we're here about South Norwalk, we're not here about Waypoint or Norwalk Center. South Norwalk is under attack, okay? And under attack meaning that we're now smaller than other parts of town. So in order for Sono to survive long-term, and I'm being a little histrionic in my words here, so take that with a slight grain of salt.
Histrionic.
It's a good word, it's in the dictionary. Look at your iPhones, you'll find it. What I really mean is that the density is clearly moved to Waypoint. So for South Norwalk to compete with that.
Well, in other places outside of the core.
Outside, absolutely. So let's use Waypoint for a moment, okay? That we need to put density back in South Norwalk, otherwise South Norwalk will continue to be fragile. And I think that most of us are here very worried about that from lots of perspectives. And the only way to really do that is to re-densify it. And we know we have lots of issues in South Norwalk. It's not easy to get through. The traffic is difficult. The roads are relatively small. And we don't want a superhighway. We already got one, West Avenue. So I think we have to see what think about what Colin was saying, that density is really important. The street level is really important because people react to what's on the street.
Yeah.
We do a lot of work in Portland, Oregon. It's the best in the country at dealing with the street level. So I think there's some design standards are really important to put together on this.
200 square foot blocks in Portland area.
That's
a lot of forest.
Yep, 200 by 200. That is the key to Portland, no question about it. The other thing I'm now going to ask, what's the process here? Is this, like this is a $45 million parking garage. Is that something that Catherine's going to do? Or is Tim doing it? Tim's buying a lot of stuff down there.
Throwing the football at you.
It's a rhetorical question for the moment. And so what is the process, or where's the end result of this? Is the city going to set something up? Public bid or
Yes.
proposal for
Yes.
parking garage and all that stuff?
Ultimately, this is to get us to a point that we have something to go out to the market with.
Okay, and is there a timeline?
We'd like to have it be sooner than later.
Okay, let's put it on.
Well, if you look at our little chart, we would like to come to some conclusions by early summer. And that's our process here. Those guys will.
This summer for the information gathering and the construction of the RFP.
To have the RFP.
Can I come back in with one more thing? Just in terms of talking about connections for pedestrians and other people and accessing other areas, I think it would be very important and beneficial to the study of the block if you included the intersection at North Main and in MLK, and also MLK in Washington, because I used to live up on Fairfield Avenue right off the highway there. Exit 14, and I walk down to the office every day, and it's like, I mean, it wasn't a fantastic walk, but that entire Cedar Street neighborhood has been, reinvented itself, and it's very pedestrian friendly, and they've done a really good job with it. So, connecting that corridor and allowing all those residents from Golden Hill and up on Flax Hill to come down and have a better experience crossing that horrible intersection would be, a great thing to have in the plan. And additionally, I forget the gentleman's name that brought up the other intersection to the north, but Joe mentioned that, normalizing that intersection to some extent, and maybe getting rid of the bypass and, bringing it into a more traditional T intersection might create more opportunities to reduce congestion in some ways and make it easier to navigate.
Yeah, this kind of exercise is an opportunity to, set the hood.
Yeah, so I feel like
proxy
including
for
that
these kinds of other things that need to be attended to.
would probably be beneficial.
The planning commission folks have had a lot of problems with that intersection. Voiced it multiple times.
Yes, sir.
I'm the bike lane guy. The TOD plan that was done last year by redevelopment actually has a proposal for a cycle track up the middle of West Avenue that's kind of gone by the wayside because of the mall, and there's just no real estate left in the street to put it in, unfortunately. However, I think Norwalk has been schizophrenic. We are, for many years, we are a suburb and a city, but we don't know what we are. And I think that this project could be the catalyst to put us finally into the urban city camp. But what that means is you do have to provide alternative transportation, or we will be sitting in gridlock. Because every car on the street is every bike on the street or every foot trip is one less car. So I will just, push. I'm on the Bike Walk Task Force. Colin is, and there are other members here. We travel other places. We saw what Indianapolis did. We saw what Dayton, Columbus, Louisville, Kentucky, you name it. Every city across America has put in the biking infrastructure. They've drawn in the millennials. They take less cars. They now have less traffic in many cases. Chattanooga, amazing. Nashville, Memphis, they're all doing it. We seem to be, yeah, but there's a lot of people who think that it's only happening in Portland or there's, sort of granola chomping cities. It's happening everywhere. And we have to get out of the you get in your car. I live 4 blocks from here and I got my car to come here. I mean, that's shameful. But I know. But the truth is, that big picture of this is the multi-use, the mixed use is so important because all of those places do have office. I just read an article in yesterday's New York Times. Pittsburgh just took Macy's downtown. They're making it multi-use space with incubator business, smaller business space. This is what we have to be doing. And I thought the 50 Washington was going to residential at one point. They were going to put glass on it. And it scared me because I thought that's going to remove all the people that go to lunch every day and feed the restaurant. So office is really important.
Yeah.
Put some footprint in there, and don't forget how important the bike lane or the cycle track or whatever it is. That's not just a little luxury. It's essential, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
I'll stop talking.
No, keep at that. That's really
I would like to say something.
Yes, sir.
When he's talking about all these different cities that he has traveled to, I have also been in all those cities. And those cities have wider areas, wider streets than we have in this area. Because bike lanes here, if you notice the bike lanes here, to me, they're dangerous in a sense. It could be good because for the simple reason if somebody opens up their car door, somebody's riding a bike, they're hurt. It's a lot narrower here than it is in any of those cities he's talking about.
Yeah, that can be done naively. Safety is important. My practice has created bike lanes in Manhattan and other places. It's a surgical, delicate operation. Understood. Yes, sir.
A lot of blood, sweat, and money is going into Washington Street to make it cool, which was a term I think Clay might have used, and exciting. And that's worked to a fairly large degree. The other developments around town, which were flooded at this point, I think it's safe to say, are not cool, and they're not exciting. And this section of town has that advantage, and we don't want to lose it. And I think that the buildings that you would be proposing here, including the garage, maybe especially the garage, that part of it which could be seen from outside, should be done in a special way.
So you're speaking on behalf of Vibe.
Like that. Like that.
Thank you.
Vast amounts of color, public art, the passageways to lead from the courtyard and the garage and whatever buildings are in there out to North Main and to Washington Street should be Disney-like, if you will. And we want to make sure that Sono remains a very special place. And that's not terribly expensive. It can be done through design and color and plantings. Some places have very remarkable plantings that define it as a special place. And part of that would be the walkway, the street walkway, all the way to the railroad station, because we're looking to attract as many people as we can to come by train.
Sure.
Spend some time and money down here, and we have the assets if we don't let them get squandered away in pedestrian design.
So you will look for who is the steward of vibe, and what is he or she doing on behalf of this exercise?
Do you have one?
I'm just saying, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
I would like
At
to
the
see
moment,
one
yeah.
because
It's important.
worse luck, the city doesn't have anybody.
Yeah.
And it's an unfilled slot at this point for the city.
Good point, thank
I
you.
sort of want to follow up on that, because I think what we're asking you to do is define what is the character of South Norwalk? And what mechanisms you put in this planning process that says, these are the characteristic issues. So, you know, cornices are characteristic of South Norwalk. Narrow facades, big windows, these are all characteristic elements of South Norwalk. You know, how does this not become the Avalon of South Norwalk? Because that character, as Collins was talking about, that is the vibe.
Yes.
That's why people come here. It's a unique experience to come here, other than going to Fairfield or Westport, they want it here. Because the infrastructure here is quite stable. So we kind of want more of it, I think that's what we're talking about, but there is no mechanism in NOAA to control this or to influence it. So this project, as a way of having design guidelines, if I can use that not desirable term, is an important process.
Agreed. What else we got?